You lose your phone, and you feel a flash of panic. You lose a person, and something in you breaks that no words can fully explain. But the real answer for why grief feels the way it does is far stranger than sadness. It is older than language itself. Somewhere in the mountains of northern Iraq, inside a cave called Shanidar, archaeologists found something that changed how we think about being human. A Neanderthal skeleton. Buried on its side, surrounded by clusters of ancient pollen. For decades, scientists believed this meant flowers had been placed on the body. A funeral, a goodbye. 60,000 years before anyone wrote a word. Was this proof that grief is ancient, or just wishful thinking projected onto old bones? The archaeologist who found it, Ralph Selecki, believed it was the former. He argued that Neanderthals felt loss the way you do, that they marked death with intention, not instinct. Later researchers pushed back, suggesting the pollen may have blown in or been dragged by burrowing rodents. The debate never fully closed. But here is what nobody disputes. The body was deliberately placed in the ground, curled, positioned, cared for. Someone chose to do that instead of walking away. Think about what that means. Before agriculture, before cities, before anyone could write down a single memory of the person they lost, humans were already doing something with grief instead of just feeling it. They were turning it into action. Your brain today still does the same thing. You clean out a closet. You write a card you'll never send. You keep a voicemail you'll never delete. None of that is irrational. It's ancient behavior wearing modern clothes. Here's where it gets stranger. Grief is not unique to humans. Elephants have been observed returning to the bones of dead herd members, touching the skulls with their trunks, staying near a body for days. Chimpanzees have been filmed carrying dead infants for weeks, refusing to let go. Something is happening across species that looks almost exactly like mourning, which raises an uncomfortable question. If grief isn't uniquely human, what is it actually for? Psychologist John Bowlby spent decades studying this exact question. His research on attachment showed something simple but profound. The bond between two living creatures is not just emotional, it's biological. It's wired into the nervous system as a survival mechanism. When you attach to someone, your brain begins to treat their presence as part of your own safety. Their voice becomes a signal that you are okay. Their absence becomes a threat. So when someone dies, your brain isn't just sad, it's confused. It keeps expecting the person to walk through the door. It keeps reaching for a phone that will never be answered. Bowlby called this protest, the mind searching, again and again, for someone it knows is gone. Have you ever caught yourself thinking you heard someone's voice months after they died? That's not weakness, that's ancient wiring doing exactly what it evolved to do. For most of human history, grief wasn't a private experience you processed alone in silence. It was communal, loud, physical. In many ancient and indigenous cultures, mourning involved wailing, chest beating, ritual scarring, even temporary exile from daily life. Grief had a shape, it had rules, it had a community holding you while you fell apart. Compare that to now. You get 3 days of bereavement leave. You're expected to answer emails by the following Monday. Somewhere between ancient wailing rituals and modern inboxes, grief lost its social permission to be loud. Anthropologists studying pre-industrial societies noticed something important. Grief rituals weren't just about the person who died. They were about protecting the community left behind. A funeral wasn't only a goodbye. It was a mechanism to stop the fabric of the group from tearing apart. Shared mourning kept people bonded to each other when their world had just proven how fragile life could be. That's the part modern grief is often missing. Not the sadness, the witnesses. Researchers Dennis Klass, Phyllis Silverman, and Stephen Nickman introduced a concept in the 1990s that quietly overturned a century of psychology. For decades, the dominant belief was that healthy grieving meant letting go, moving on, detaching from the person who died so you could return to normal life. Klass and his colleagues studied grieving parents and found the opposite was true. The people who healed best weren't the ones who let go. They were the ones who kept a continuing bond, talking to the person who died, keeping their belongings visible, marking their birthday every year, not as torment, but as connection. Which means the way you grieve right now, whether you talk to a photo, keep a jacket that still smells like them, or set a place at the table out of habit, isn't a failure to move on. It might be exactly how the human mind is designed to heal. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. Grief isn't the opposite of love. It's the price of it. The intensity of your grief is almost mathematically a direct reflection of how deeply you were attached. You don't grieve strangers. You grieve the people who became part of your internal map of safety, the ones your nervous system quietly filed under home. That reframes everything. The unbearable weight you feel isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that something real existed. 60,000 years ago, in a cave in Iraq, someone felt that same unbearable weight. And instead of walking away from a body, they knelt down and did something about it. Every era after that has just found new rituals for the same ancient impulse. Wakes, candles, photographs on a mantle, a playlist you can't listen to yet, a voicemail you keep for no logical reason except that deleting it would feel like losing them twice. You are not overreacting when grief hits harder than you expect. You are running code that predates cities, predates writing, predates almost everything you'd call civilization. Somewhere far back in your ancestry, a hand once smoothed dirt over a body it couldn't bear to leave exposed. That instinct never left. It just changed its shape. So the next time grief catches you off guard, in a grocery store, in a familiar smell, in a song you didn't expect, remember what it actually is. Not a malfunction, not a wound that should already be closed. It's one of the oldest forms of love the human mind has ever known. One that has survived every ice age, every migration, every century since that first quiet burial in the dark. You don't lose a phone and feel your whole world tilt. You lose a person, and for a moment, 60,000 years of human history moves through you at once. If you enjoyed this video and want more stories that explore the hidden psychology, history, and science behind being human, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, let me know in the comments, what topic should we explore next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.